You're not, but okay. So I'm supposed to tell you that I'm recording this call.
Okay.
I don't know if I am, but
It says on my screen that you are recording the call.
okay. Now I have no idea how to save or recover this call or anything like that. All right. So, tell me about yourself and your blog. Let's do the interview. Okay.
Well, the blog is something that I started when I retired a few years ago. I've been working in construction for over 40 years. I had 35 years of experience with a major national, in fact, international construction company. And for 25 of those years, I was an estimator. And for about 15 of those years, I was dealing with economics. So when I retired, I continued to keep up with all of the economics and started the blog because I found through my 25 years of estimating experience that there was a lot of information that just was not being used in the industry or was being used incorrectly. And I set out to write about that and explain to people how to use the information, where to find the information, and the pitfalls that you could needed to be aware of. And so the blog grew and grew, and it became my source for providing information to the industry, but it also became my source for people to call me up and ask me if I could do some small consulting efforts for them. So the blog has become my business.
Become your business. Very interesting. This is a crazy thing. You can see I've got gray hair. You look rather young, relative to be retired.
I'm 66.
You're 60, my same age.
I started working in construction in 1972, and I retired when I was 62 or 63.
You were 62. Okay, so interesting. By the way, I obviously am not retired, but I obviously self-employed, running this business of my own, and so I have no need to retire as such, if you know what I mean. And I don't want it right now. The question I have was, you say that you started the blog, I believe, about 3 years ago. Is that correct?
Yes. So I retired in, I think, fall of 2014. And right around that time, I started the blog. But for the entire first year, the blog was just getting its feet wet. And it wasn't until 2016 or 2017 that I started to see the activity bars every week start to increase. And it has grown rapidly in the last year or two. The past 2 years has been market growth improvement. There's a post that I wrote recently and put out there and said, this tracks some of the growth in my blog, some of the statistics that track growth in my blog, and it spells that out. But about a year or two ago, I was getting maybe 2,500 visitors a month that would read 5,000 things a month, and now that's more than doubled.
Yeah, I did read that one, and I'll probably cite that when I write my article here, correlating with this video. You say that this has been this created your business for you, and basically is I assume a consulting business. What sort of things do you focus on in your consulting?
Well, two primary things. First, the biggest product on my blog is the inflation indices. And occasionally I'll get calls from builders or developers or even companies that like fast food companies that build all of their own buildings around the country. And what they are looking for is two things. One, what is the inflation rate going to be in the various cities that we're going to build in next year? And the other thing that they want to know is what's the level of market activity going to be in those cities. So almost exclusively, clients that call me up want detailed information that is nailed down to a city or a metropolitan area rather than the national level data.
So in those cases, you go and do some customized research, I guess, for them.
Yeah, it takes quite a bit of research to get the information needed to develop the market activity or the inflation for a particular metropolitan area.
And so you're getting, I assume you're suggesting most of this business is coming from people who see the blog and the general content and then call you for that information.
Absolutely. All of the business that I've received is from people that have found my blog and have been reading it and and have contacted me to see if I could go further with the data.
Yeah, of course, it's an interesting point. Well, the competition, we set the rules several years ago that would be a judging component as well as popular vote, and the reason for that, of course, is that you have large corporations can easily get suppliers and contractors to flood the polling process without any trouble, and employees. And conversely, the popular vote element is an important part because it partly it shows A, commitment to the process, and B, of course, if there's some genuine degree of interest in the thing, not just people being told to vote, it gives a signal that the blog is relevant. And obviously, you passed on that to get on the ranking level. And then, of course, the next stage was to get the judges to do their thing. And I just don't tell them what to do. They judge. So you definitely won.
I found it interesting, and I had read that same the comments that you're making now. I had read that about the previous years, that it wasn't necessarily going to be the person with the highest votes. But when I looked at the results recently, and I saw that some people had votes that were, 100 or 200 or 300, I thought, well, I haven't got a chance. So I gave up hope until I got your email recently, and well, yep. Here we are.
Yeah, that's right, and that's intentional. The system is meant to give the opportunity for someone who's produced a great blog to get the publicity you want. Where do you see the future of your blog and your work?
Well, I will absolutely continue to, as long as I can, and I'm in my health, and that could be many years to come, I hope. But I will continue to provide the analysis and the information that I do on the national level data, because I get a lot of phone calls, people calling me up and asking me to interpret something that they didn't understand in the data. That still leads me to believe that there's many, many people in the industry out there that need that kind of explanation. And if the clients that I get through my blog, which currently don't even make up 1/4 of what my previous salary was, but if I continue in retirement to get a couple of clients like that, then that's fine. That's all I'm really looking for. I don't want to work full time. I'm retired. I want to go on summer camping trips. I want to go on winter skiing trips. I want to be able to do what I want in retirement, but I want to keep my feet wet, and I want to be able to provide a service to the industry that I know no one else is providing.
That's very good. And I should know this because it's in your documentation, but where are you based?
Where am I located? Is that your question?
Yeah.
I live just outside of Providence, Rhode Island.
Okay.
I've been a New Englander since 1979, so I've been here for 50 years? No, 40 years.
4 years. I know exactly when 79 was, because that was my big moment in life. I was in the middle of Africa, having lived through the Zimbabwe-Rhodesia War as a joke.
Yeah. Well, I went to college late, I went to college 5 years late, and I got out of college in 1979, and I immediately came up here to Providence, Rhode Island, and I began my career with Gilbane Building Company. I spent 35 years with them.
That's impressive to stay with one company for 35 years. You know.
Well, I used to do, although I was an estimator for Gilbane, I always was called on to do unique studies, and they were always something to do with the economics of construction. So I've been doing those kinds of things for them for many years, and they found that they could turn to me, and I would find a way to get the job done. So that,
sorry, carry on. I'm sorry to interrupt you there. Could you give me, now the question is to put your crystal ball on with the economy and the industry and all that. I'm going to ask you what you feel the progress, the prognosis is and the direction is going to be on a national level for the next several years. If you want to go there.
Well, I'm prepared to answer that because I've just been looking at all my forecasting data and getting prepared to do a mid-year update.
Okay.
I see there's a slight downturn going on right now. It's more so in residential than there is in non-residential or infrastructure type work. However, I don't see that as continuing to point downward. I see that as a blip in the radar. It may last for 6 months or 8 months, and it's going to turn up again. So I see increased activity again next year. But there's a couple of problems I see. For several years, we've been reading about labor shortages. Mm-hmm. And I've just did a study, and I just wrote a guest article for a website, and there are many articles on my blog. Construction labor has been increasing at a faster rate than construction business has, and that's been going on for years. Mm-hmm. Even though some companies are claiming that there's a shortage, they've hired more labor to get the amount of work done that they used to get done than they have at any time in the past. So I see that as a problem. If next year we see a rebound in construction, but it falls off after that, or something leads us, our administration potentially leads us into a recession. If a recession hits, even if it's milder than the last recession, I feel as though there's going to be a very huge impact on labor. And I think that will be the time when we will see declines in the labor force. And that's what happened in the last recession. What I see is it appears as though major companies are increasing their staffing according to the increases in their revenue. But what they're not taking into account is the inflation rate. And if you look at revenue increases of 5% a year over the last 2 years, and inflation increases also of 5% a year over the last 2 years, there's been absolutely no increase in volume in 2 years, even though spending is up 10%. So revenue is spending. Revenue and spending, being the same thing, went up 5% a year for the last 2 years for the entire industry nationwide. But inflation was 5% a year for the last 2 years. So all of the increases in revenue in the last 2 years have been inflation, not real business volume. I use an example in presentations to make this a real simple analogy for people to understand. You had a farm stand and you sold a crate of apples 3 years ago for $25, and you sold the same crate of apples this year for $100. Did your business go up? Or did your revenue go up? Your revenue increased, but your business remained the same. All of the increase in your revenue was inflation. The cost of the apples went up, but you still only sold one crate of apples, and that's exactly what you sold 3 years ago, one crate of apples. So your business volume remained the same. Your revenues increased dramatically because of inflation. This, I think, is a mistake that companies are making. And I have, in fact, spoken to several management staff at several companies, and they were making that mistake. And they've gone back and taken another look at their business plan to make sure that they're on track with where they want to be. So I know that some of the things I'm writing about on my blog are helping people with their business. It's not something that I can make money on, but it's something worthwhile for the industry.
And I have here is you're suggesting the industry is not achieving any improvement in productivity.
Say that again, please.
Sounds like you're suggesting the industry is not seeing any improvement in productivity.
It's not. This industry hasn't seen it. Well, let me put it this way: in the last 7 or 8 years since the rebound, we saw 2 years of productivity improvements. We saw 5 years of productivity declines. And if you go back and look at the 2000s and the 1990s, you'll see similar activity. You'll see either no improvement in productivity or you'll see productivity declines. From 2007 to 2010, productivity declines were large, very large.
Why has that happened? Why has that happened?
Because the recession hit, companies were way overstaffed, but the amount of business volume declined by 40%, and companies let go 25% of their staff.
Okay.
All right. So by the end of the recession and at the beginning of the recovery, they were overstaffed by 15% compared to 5 years earlier. So since the recovery began in 2011, staffing has grown at a faster rate than business volume has grown.
So it sounds like you're saying this. Is this just in the management administration side of the industry and business, or is it the whole operation?
Well, it's got to go across the whole operation. I mean, it's got to go down to the tradesmen in the field. You know, it takes more tradesmen, and I can't answer why. Is it because their trades are less trained, or they're less skilled? I do not know, although that's widely accepted as one of the reasons, less skill. But there's got to be a couple other reasons besides that. In the administrative side, there are new tools being incorporated into construction, and it takes more people to use those tools. And we're learning all of those tools right now. So are those tools as productive as they will be? Maybe not. Maybe in the future they'll become more productive, and it won't take so many people to provide the service with these new tools, like what do you call it, with the things that fly around and look down on your job? You know, drones. Somebody's operating these drones, and somebody's taking time to learn how to use the information that they can get from these drones. We are probably going through a learning curve on that, where it's adding people to the job to get the job done. It's not increasing productivity yet. I think it will improve productivity, but I don't know that we're there yet.
Okay, so there's a few things I want to ask you following up on this. It's certainly the mantra that I talk with some of the people in the associations. Oh, there's a serious labor shortage. There's a real problem. We don't have enough people. It sounds like you're suggesting, well, that may not be totally accurate. It may be that there is a serious shortage in people who are working efficiently, or the organizations who are deploying their people efficiently.
That's exactly what I'm saying. And I have the facts to show to people that labor has been growing faster than business volume. So you need to include this as part of your labor shortage, because it's not just a labor shortage, and it's not just, I mean, in the last 5 years, excuse me, in the last 5 years, well, I should say from 2013 to 2018, We have increased construction jobs by 1.4 million. That's the second fastest 5-year growth rate of construction jobs in history. Does that sound to you like there's a construction jobs shortage?
Well, the argument there is we need all these workers and there's a shortage of them, but you're suggesting that doesn't make sense because the actual volume isn't increased to justify.
That's correct. Jobs have gone up. I'll throw two sample numbers out there. I don't know what exactly the numbers are, but jobs have increased by 25%, and real construction volume has only increased by 20%. So if real volume only increases by 20%, why do you need 25% more staff? That question is not being asked.
And the other thing, I've just come from sessions where we're focusing on technology and the so-called disruptions and the whole the new era of the cloud-based systems and project management systems and operating systems and, of course, modular building and all that sort of stuff are supposed to be disruptive on the industry. Are you seeing any of that, or is that just?
I cannot answer that question. I do not know the answer.
Fair enough. I'm probably gonna have to edit this portion out of the published interview, but as you know, we got these regional publications, and I don't know if you've done an analysis or written something that I could reprint on this whole issue of the phantom labor shortage, which is what you seem to be suggesting.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite get your question there.
Have you written something that I could republish or based on your what I sounds like you're calling it? What I'm putting words in your mouth. The phantom labor shortage.
Okay, so you're looking. Do I have something that you could use regarding the labor shortage?
Yes.
Yes, I certainly do.
Okay.
I have a couple things on my blog, but it would be beneficial if I go through the blog and pick the appropriate one and copy it into a Word document and send it to you.
That sounds great. And I'll post it in some of my different titles that I've got around Canada and US. Okay. So it sounds like we're in a funny and unusual place. Supposed growth, but really not actually much real growth in terms of the actual volume of business or actual construction that's being done, if I'm correct.
Well, let me, so we talked a little earlier in our discussion about what do I see coming down the pike in the future. And I said that I think that we're going to experience a 6-month slowdown. Mm-hmm. That slowdown is going to turn into relatively good growth in 2020. And why do I see that? Construction starts is one of the most important pieces of information that I rely on to do my forecast. And construction starts for instance, if a $10 billion project starts today, that $10 billion gets recorded as a construction start today. Mm-hmm. But that $10 billion is going to take 4 or 5 years to spend. So spending is spread out over a cash flow curve for the different types of projects we see. And one of the things that occurred in the last year or two is a tremendous amount of infrastructure work started, particularly airports and rail jobs. And there was a massive amount of new starts that's going to take 6 to 8 years to spend. We're going to see a nice big increase in spending in 2020. Mm-hmm. Now, come back to the contractors that are talking about labor shortages. Are any of those contractors looking into the future, anticipating that their spending is going to increase at a rate where it's okay if I carry 5 or 10% extra staff today because I'm going to need them all next year? That's a possibility. Mm-hmm. You know, I'd like to see next year construction volume growth come in faster than jobs growth. And that's a possibility. In which case, next year will show up productivity gain.
Very good. So it sounds like you have a reasonably optimistic perspective of where things are.
I do, but I am worried about the next recession, and I think we're headed in that direction.
And how soon is that going to happen?
That, if I had a crystal ball and had that answer, I would be making a lot of money as a consultant. I'll tell you, certainly I think within the next 3 years, we're headed, and it's possible that we could see that we're headed there within a year, but we may not get there quite within a year. But boy, residential construction is down 8% in a year. That was exactly what was going on just prior to the last recession. Residential construction dropped for 2 years before the rest of construction dropped, and then all hell broke loose. And construction dropped by 30 or 40%, and we lost 2.5 million jobs. Well, it looks like we're leading into that. If we don't see an increase this year in residential construction, I would move up my anticipated date for the next recession.
Okay, so in that model, it sounds like you're suggesting that, okay, next year, this year, next several months will be a little bit slow. Next year, because of the starts and the amount of activity that's already happening and the workflow that's built into them, boom, resumes.
Right.
And perhaps 3 years from now, the four-letter word hits the fan.
But so let's watch this next year. Dodge reports construction starts every month.
Yep.
And construction starts, the average length of a non-residential building construction start, when you look at a whole year's worth of starts, is the money will get spent over the next 3 years. If starts drop next year because companies don't want to invest in new construction because they are seeing the signs of a recession coming down the road, then new starts next year is going to slow spending for the next 3 years after that. We'll still get the big 2020 improvement based on what's already in the starts and in backlog today. But if next year starts go down, then that's accelerating the signs towards a mild recession.
And of course, if they go down even more, then I guess, and the thing that will slow the pressure of the recession is the volume of starts of these large infrastructure projects, which will be carrying on presumably through this process. Is that?
I mean, right. If construction starts this year or next year remain the same as at least as they are now,
yeah,
then we're not going to see a major decline in construction spending over the next 3 years. But if they go down 10% or they go down 15%, that's a dramatic decline, and because they haven't gone, construction starts have not decreased in 8 years. There has not been a down year. So we're near all-time, we are at all-time highs.
And yet you're saying at the same time that the construction starts at all-time highs, but the actual volume of real construction is not increasing that much. Am I correct?
Well, yes, but remember now that one of the big increases in construction starts over the last year or two was that infrastructure work, and what we got out of that, particularly in transportation with airports and rail jobs, we got a large volume of work that's going to take 6 to 8 years.
Okay.
So it's going to get spread out over a much longer period of time, and it doesn't give that giant leap in 1 year or 2 years that you might expect in, the next year. Starts go up by 20% and you expect spending to go up by 20% next year. But what really happened was your backlog increased by 20% and you have 5 more years of work to go. So you have a longer duration to spend it rather than a higher volume each month in a shorter duration.
And on the positive side, if I'm correct, that would mitigate some of the effects of a recession, because the volume of work that's flowing will slow down if a low down it starts. There's still this multi-year projects going on instead of everything just shutting down right away.
That's correct. The higher the backlog, backlog does two things. It gives you the work in the current year, but it extends work out into how many years beyond that. And so, I mean, if I were to open up my spreadsheets and stop, take out all the numbers for predicted starts for the next year, 2, 3 years, I could look at how long the backlog would last. And so I could get a picture of what's in backlog today, when will it run out? So if starts decline, we are headed to a mild downturn, or if they decline, a very large decline, we're headed towards a recession.
Got it. Okay. Any final words or observations?
Well, I hope people keep reading, and I hope people begin to get a better understanding. We have a tremendous amount of data in the construction industry, and it's not all used to its maximum advantage. And one of the things that I hope to turn around is that deficit. I would hope that the more and more people that read the information that I write about and the explanations that I give gain a better understanding, and it helps them perform better in their business.
All right, Ed, thank you very much for speaking with me for this interview. I will be reviewing it, hopefully figuring out a way to do a slight edit and posting this within a couple of days on my blog. And I appreciate it, and want to thank you for entering the competition and providing the information you've shared. It's very useful. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Mark, for the opportunity. I've seen a couple of blog sources out there that sometimes someone will say that view these 10 blogs. I think they're great, but I haven't seen anyone else that's running a contest, if you will, like you've put up, and I'm glad I had the opportunity to get into it.
All right. Well, I appreciate that, and thanks again. And now I'm going to try to figure a way to save this recording and conclude the call. But I will send again. I certainly welcome you picking out. I'll send you a brief email in order of the parameters of the questions I have for my own publications. I'm so I say editorially hungry for material, especially since about a month and a half ago we started a daily because of some really arcane laws in Ontario. That allow us to serve certain types of legal advertising, but we have to publish a physical product on PDF every day. So it's a very large amount of work.
Well, I'm always available by email to answer any questions you might have.
All right. Thank you again. And now I got to figure. So I'm going to conclude the call, but I really appreciate it. And thanks again.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.